Lady Kenworth's dining room was warm with candlelight and the smell of roasted pheasant. And Cordelia Graves had been aware of Marcus Havelock's arm for 3 full courses. 4 inches from hers, steady and still in the way of a man who had once held a ship's wheel against a gale and found the experience unremarkable. She had watched him from the corner of her eye all evening. The way he set down his wine glass without sound, the way he answered Lady Kenworth's questions about Parliament with the measured patience of someone answering questions about the weather in a country he no longer lived in. He was performing, she knew. She had watched him perform the Duke for 3 years, and she knew the difference between the man and the costume. What she had not planned for was what happened when she set down her own fork, lifted her voice to a carrying pitch, and said the words she had been rehearsing for 6 days. "Lord Pemberton has asked me to marry him." The table stopped, not gradually, all at once, the way a clock stops. Forks paused between plate and mouth. Lady Kenworth's hand froze on her wine glass. At the far end of the table, Lord Pemberton went very still in the manner of a man who has heard his name attached to an action he did not perform. And beside her, Marcus's wine glass tilted. He caught it. But the sound it made against the tablecloth was loud enough that the guests nearest him turned. And what came out of his mouth in that same instant was not the Duke's measured tone, but something raw and involuntary. A single syllable wrenched out of him by 6 years of careful silence, colliding with 14 witnesses. "Who?" His voice cracked on the vowel. Not curiosity. Something else entirely. Something that split the word open like wood under pressure, and the entire table heard it. Cordelia turned to look at him and found his face unguarded in a way she had never seen. Jaw tight, the line of his breathing visibly changed. His eyes on her with an intensity that was not anger, but something worse. Something that looked like a man watching a door close on a room he had never allowed himself to enter. She registered it. She filed it. She continued. "My uncle arranged the introduction," she said, her voice steady, addressed to the table at large. "The proposal came last Tuesday." At the far end, Pemberton opened his mouth, closed it. He had not proposed. But denying it publicly would make him appear dishonest, and Declan Graves's hand had already moved under the table. Cordelia caught the motion from the edge of her vision, a slight pressure toward Pemberton's side, a silent instruction. "Confirm it." Pemberton said nothing. His silence was the pause of a man who had walked into a scene without a script and was trying to locate the exit. Beside her, Marcus picked up his wine glass, set it down again, and did not speak for the remainder of dinner. But his knuckles, wrapped around the stem, were white. The meal continued. Lady Kenworth, who had organized the seating arrangement with the deliberate care of a woman who had been waiting 7 years for one of them to stop being careful, redirected the conversation to the subject of the Cheltenham races with the practiced smoothness of a hostess who had managed more dangerous tables than this. The other guests, 11 of them, all from county families who knew the Graves name and the Huxley estate and the trust that had sat in Declan's management since Cordelia was 17, resumed eating with the particular attentiveness of people who have just witnessed something and are deciding what it means. Declan Graves spoke twice during the remaining courses. Both times his voice was warm, measured, the voice of an uncle who was quietly pleased. He said nothing directly about the announcement. He did not need to. The warmth was the announcement, the avuncular satisfaction broadcasting to the table that this was a settled matter, a family matter, a matter that had been arranged with everyone's best interests at heart. Cordelia ate her pheasant and did not look at her uncle. She looked instead at the candles. 3 of them in the silver holder before her, the middle one burning lower than the others because it had been lit first. She had spent 6 days choosing this table, this room, these particular 14 people, because she needed witnesses. Not friends. Witnesses. People who would remember what they heard and who had heard it, and in what order. The county families would talk, and when they talked, the shape of what Declan had intended to do would be visible in a way it could never be made visible behind closed doors. She had not planned for Marcus's voice cracking. She had planned for the Duke's mask, that careful, courteous blankness he had worn since his brother Edward drowned 3 years ago, and the title dropped onto him like a stone. She had planned to use his composure as a backdrop against which her announcement would seem calm and considered. She had not planned for the vowel splitting, for the white knuckles, for the look on his face that she could not quite name but recognized in her own chest. She had lied anyway, because strategy came before the truth she saw in his face, and because the 11 months remaining before her 25th birthday did not leave room for the luxury of stopping to feel things. After dinner, the guests moved to Lady Kenworth's drawing room, and Cordelia moved to the terrace. The night air was cold and carried the smell of rain that had not yet arrived. She stood at the stone railing and listened to the sound of conversation drifting through the tall windows and waited, because she had planned for this too. She heard his footsteps, steady, evenly spaced, the walk of a man who had spent 8 years on ship decks, where uneven footing was a practical problem rather than a social signal. "It is not true," she said, before he could speak. Marcus came to stand at the railing beside her, not close enough to touch. He was very good at not touching. "Pemberton did not propose," she said. "My uncle has been trying to arrange the match for 2 months. I refused twice in private. This was the 3rd refusal, the public one." Marcus said nothing. She could see his hands on the stone railing, and she could see that they were not steady. "Why Pemberton?" he asked. "Because naming Pemberton forces my uncle to choose between 2 bad options," Cordelia said. "If Declan confirms the arrangement publicly, he exposes that he engineered it, that he presented a match to Pemberton as my desire when I had refused him twice. If he denies it, he humiliates Pemberton and destroys their alliance. Either way, he loses control of the timeline." "What timeline?" She turned to face him properly. The candlelight from the windows caught the line of his jaw, the steadiness of his posture, and the fact that his breathing was not, in this moment, steady at all. "My inheritance is held in trust until I marry or turn 25, she said. 25 is 11 months away. My uncle has been managing the trust since I was 17. He has been managing it poorly, Marcus, or rather, he has been managing it for his own benefit and reporting it as management of mine. If I reach 25 unmarried, the trust transfers to my control and an independent audit becomes inevitable. Lord Pemberton is 51, a widower, and a political ally of my uncle's. He would have assumed the trust without examining the accounts." Marcus was very still, the kind of still that was not calm, but its opposite, the stillness of a man applying considerable force to the task of remaining in one place. "Why are you telling me?" he asked. "Because your voice cracked," Cordelia said. "The entire table heard it. I planned for your composure. I did not plan for whatever that was, and I think you deserve to know that the thing you reacted to was not what it appeared to be." His breathing shifted. Not a sound, just a visible change in the set of his shoulders. "What do you need?" he asked. The question was so direct, so immediately practical, that something in her chest loosened slightly. This was the Marcus she remembered from 6 summers ago. The second son who had argued with her about rigging for 40 minutes, and then conceded the point without embarrassment. Not the Duke. The man. "I need a letter," she said, "to the board of my father's trust, demanding an independent inquiry into the accounts. If I write it, it is a niece making a family complaint. If you write it under ducal seal, it is a legal event. They cannot ignore a duke." "You came here for my stationery," Marcus said. "Yes. Not for me." She held his gaze. "I did not say that." Silence. The rain had not arrived, but the air was full of it. That particular weight before a storm. The pressure that makes the night feel smaller than it is. "I will write the letter," Marcus said, "and then you will tell me the full extent of what has been done to the estate. Everything, before you leave tonight." She told him everything. 3 weeks before the dinner, Cordelia had been sitting in the small parlor at Briarfield when her maid Agnes came to her with a face carefully arranged into the expression of a woman who has decided that saying the thing is less dangerous than not saying it. Agnes had noticed discrepancies. The household accounts for the South Wing repairs. Funds reported as disbursed that did not correspond to any work Agnes could identify. She had asked Mrs. Fellows, the housekeeper, who had gone very quiet, and said she would speak with Lady Cordelia directly. 2 days later, Declan arrived at Briarfield. He had not come about the accounts. He could not have known Agnes had spoken. Cordelia was certain of that. He had come about Lord Pemberton, who was, he said, a splendid match. A man of property, of standing, of sound judgment. A man her father would have approved. "My father is not here to approve anyone," Cordelia said. "No," Declan agreed, with a warmth that made her want to put the room between them. "He trusted me to act in his place, as he always did." He left. Agnes was dismissed from service the following morning, not by Cordelia, who had no legal authority to prevent it. By Declan, who sent the letter directly to Agnes's agency with a reference that was technically accurate and practically useless. Cordelia's pin money was reduced by half the week after. Declan visited again 10 days later. Lord Pemberton was still, he said, a splendid match. The county respected him. The arrangement would be quiet, dignified, mutually beneficial. And her father, God rest him, had expressed to Declan more than once a wish to see Cordelia settled and protected. "My father expressed many wishes to me directly," Cordelia said. "He did not mention Lord Pemberton." "You were young when he died," Declan said gently, as though her youth were a form of damage. "There were things he discussed with me that he did not wish to burden you with." He invoked her father's name 4 times in that conversation. Cordelia counted. She refused for the 2nd time. Declan left, and Cordelia walked the south garden border, her father's lavender dead under years of neglect, the beds given over to weeds and compacted earth, and understood that she had one weapon left, and it was a public one. She spent 6 days choosing the table. Now, on the Kenworth terrace, she finished telling Marcus the full account. The trust, the 11 months, the dismissed maid, the forged pin money restriction, the 2 private refusals. The dead father invoked like a legal instrument. She told him about Mrs. Fellows and the roof fund. £400, reported as spent. The roof of the south barn still open to the weather. Marcus had not moved from the railing. When she finished, he said nothing for a long moment. "You walked into that dining room tonight," he said, "knowing that if Declan managed to confirm the engagement before you could expose the scheme, you would be married to Pemberton within a month." "Yes. And you did it anyway." I had 11 months and one weapon, she said. I used the weapon. His hand was still on the stone railing. She placed her own hand over his knuckles, not to soften his grip, but to acknowledge it, pressing his tension into the stone rather than asking him to release it. 10 seconds. Then she pulled back and straightened. "Will you write the letter?" she asked. I said I would. "Then I will come to Renford House the day after tomorrow. There is a contractor letter I need to collect from Mrs. Fellows first." "Come in the morning," Marcus said. "I will have Hartwell there." She looked at him, the naval posture, the controlled breathing that was slightly less controlled than usual, the 4 inches of space he maintained between them as though it were a navigational requirement. "Your voice cracked," she said again, quietly. "I am aware," Marcus said. Neither of them moved toward the other. Neither stepped back. The rain arrived at last, light, cold, dotting the stone railing between their hands. Marcus dictated the letter to his secretary the following morning. He was specific about the language. A formal request under ducal authority for an independent examination of the Huxley Trust accounts, addressed to the board's 3 members by name, citing the legal mechanism available under the Trust's founding charter. He signed it. His secretary sealed it under the ducal crest and sent it by fast messenger before noon. Cordelia returned to Briarfield. Declan arrived that same afternoon. He came through the front door as though the house were still his to enter freely, which, legally, it was, and found her in the sitting room with her accounts ledger open on the table. He did not look at the ledger. He sat across from her in the chair her father used to read in, and his face was arranged in the expression she had come to think of as the warm version. Concerned, disappointed, loving in the way of a man who has decided that love means management. "Your father," Declan said, "would have been mortified by last night." "My father would have been mortified by the roof fund," Cordelia said. £400 reported as spent. The south barn roof was never repaired. Where did it go? Declan's warmth did not waver. "The contractors were unreliable. The matter is being remedied." "Which contractors?" "I would like their names for my records." "Cordelia." He said her name with the patience of a man explaining arithmetic to a child. "This is not a matter for your records. This is a matter being handled appropriately. What is not being handled appropriately is your behavior at Lady Kenworth's table, which has embarrassed Lord Pemberton, confused the county, and made you appear, I say this with genuine concern, unstable." "I am not unstable," she said. "I am informed." He left. He was still warm when he left, which was worse than if he had been angry. Cordelia walked the south garden border in the gray afternoon light. The lavender beds her father had planted the year she was born were compacted earth and dead stalks, neglected through 7 years of Declan's management. She crouched and pressed her fingers into the soil. Hard, dry. Nothing had been fed or watered or tended. The gate at the south end, the one her father had always meant to oil, creaked as the wind moved it. The same creak it had made since she was a child. She stood. She understood, standing there, that she could not go back to the position of a woman who managed quietly and endured. The lie was public. The inquiry was official. And Declan now knew she had begun fighting. There was no version of what came next that did not require her to keep going. Cordelia arrived at Renford House the following morning with Mrs. Fellows's contractor letter in her coat pocket. A written refusal from a Cheltenham firm dated 2 years prior, declining to undertake the south barn roof repair on the grounds that the initial payment had never arrived. The letter was addressed to Sir Declan Graves, It had been intercepted by Mrs. Fellows, who had kept it because she was the kind of woman who kept things. Marcus read it at his desk. Then he read it again. This puts the roof fund disbursement in direct contradiction with the contractor's records, he said. Yes, Cordelia said. Which is why I need it in the case file before the board receives your letter, and Declan has time to produce an alternative explanation. The case file is organized chronologically, Marcus said. The contractor letter goes after the trust disbursement records, not before. It goes first, Cordelia said. Because the contractor letter is the proof. The disbursement records are the claim. You prove the claim false before you present the claim. Otherwise, the board reads the claim first and arrives at the proof already looking for reasons to doubt it. Marcus looked at her. The board are solicitors. They read evidence in chronological order. The board are men who knew my uncle for 30 years before they knew me, Cordelia said, at a volume slightly above what the room required. I am not organizing this file for people who will be neutral. I am organizing it for people who will be predisposed to believe him. Marcus moved the contractor letter to the front of the file without further comment. They worked through the afternoon. She was fast and furious and occasionally wrong. She put the trust charter summary in the wrong section twice and argued both times that she had not. He was methodical and thorough and occasionally too careful. He spent 20 minutes on the precise legal phrasing of a cover note that Cordelia maintained could be written in 2 sentences. She paced when she was thinking, which meant she paced most of the afternoon, circling the perimeter of the study in a route that took her past the corner of the large oak desk. She walked into the corner of the desk, hip, hard. She hissed through her teeth. Marcus stood without speaking, moved the desk 6 inches to the left, and sat back down. He returned to the cover note as though he had simply adjusted his chair. Cordelia did not notice for 20 minutes. Then her pacing circuit brought her to the place where the desk corner had been and was no longer, and she stopped. You moved the desk, she said. Your hip, Marcus said. I barely felt it. You limped for 2 circuits, I counted. She looked at him. He was reading the trust charter summary, his expression entirely unchanged. 3 days after the inquiry letter was sent, Declan produced his counter move. A letter arrived at Briarfield, not addressed to Cordelia but circulating through the county families, passed from drawing room to drawing room with the quiet velocity of information that confirms what people already want to believe. It was written in her father's hand, or very nearly. The late Viscount Huxley expressing his wish that his daughter be guided toward a suitable arrangement, that her guardian be trusted to act in her best interests, that the impetuosity of youth be tempered by the wisdom of those who loved her. Cordelia read it at the breakfast table. She read it twice. Then she set it down and then looked at the window for a long moment. The handwriting was almost right. The loops, the spacing, the particular forward lean of her father's script. Almost. But the capital G at the beginning of Graves curled to the right. Her father's G always curled left. She knew his hand the way she knew the sound of the south gate. From 1,000 small encounters, from letters written in firelight when she was a child, and letters written in his last year when his hand had slowed but never changed its particular habits. She folded the forged letter, put it in her coat pocket beside the last real letter her father had ever written her, and went to Renford House. Mr. Hartwell, Marcus's solicitor, was a small man with the precise, unhurried manner of someone who had spent 40 years reading documents that other people had hoped no one would read carefully. He laid both letters side by side on Marcus's desk, the forged one and the real one, and placed the contractor records and the trust discrepancy figures alongside them. He read everything without speaking. Then he read it again. "The handwriting discrepancy is significant," Hartwell said. "Combined with the contractor records and the disbursement figures, I can compel a formal inquiry. Not a request, a compelled examination. The trust board has no legal discretion to refuse." Cordelia looked at Marcus across the desk. Something shifted in the room. Not dramatically, not with any outward ceremony. But she felt it as clearly as she had felt the change in air pressure before the rain on the Kenworth terrace. She had come to him 6 weeks ago for ducal stationery. She had come to him with contractor letters and handwriting evidence because he was the only person in the county with the legal standing to make the inquiry impossible to dismiss. The transaction had been clear and practical, and she had been careful to keep it that way. It was not that anymore. They worked late that night. Hartwell had left hours ago, and the candles had burned down and been replaced, and the evidence files were spread across every available surface. Marcus was at the window with the trust charter, marking passages in pencil. Cordelia was at the desk, cross-referencing the disbursement figures against the household accounts Mrs. Fellows had provided. She did not intend to fall asleep. One moment she was reading a column of figures, and the next she was not reading anything at all, her head resting on her folded arms, the account ledger open beneath her cheek. She did not hear Marcus cross the room. She did not feel the weight of his coat settle over her shoulders. When she woke, the candles were lower, and Marcus was at the window with a book, reading by the thin gray light of early morning. His coat was around her. He did not look up when she stirred. She did not mention the coat. He did not mention it. She straightened in the chair, rolled her neck, picked up the ledger where she had left off. After a moment, she moved her chair 2 inches toward his side of the desk. Neither of them remarked on this either. They returned to work. Declan moved on 2 fronts simultaneously, and both moves landed within the same week. The first, he spoke to 3 county families, the Aldersons, the Pembury Carrs, and Old Lady Datchet, and reframed Marcus's inquiry letter as romantic interference. A duke pursuing his niece under the guise of legal concern. A man using ducal authority to insert himself into a family matter because he had formed an attachment. The county, Declan suggested with his warmth fully deployed, ought to consider whether Lady Cordelia's behavior, the fictional engagement announcement, the inquiry request, the hours spent at Renford House, reflected good judgment or something more troubling. 3 invitations were withdrawn from Cordelia within a week. The Aldersons sent a note. The Pembury Carrs did not send a note, which was worse. The second move arrived at Renford House in the person of Lord Winton, Marcus's parliamentary ally, a broad, careful man who arrived without appointment and spoke with the directness of someone delivering news he did not enjoy. "Graves has friends in the Lords," Winton said. "2 of them are on committees that matter to you. If you press this inquiry, you will make enemies you do not currently have." "Thank you for telling me," Marcus said. "I am telling you," Winton said, "because I would like you to consider withdrawing the letter before those friendships become formal opposition." "I will not be withdrawing the letter," Marcus said. Winton looked at him for a moment. "The woman is not worth a parliamentary seat, Havelock." "The inquiry is not about the woman," Marcus said. "It is about a forged document and 7 years of trust fund fraud. I would have written the same letter for anyone." Winton left. Marcus returned to the study and did not mention the conversation to Cordelia until she asked him directly that evening why Winton had come. He told her. She was quiet for a moment. "You could withdraw it," she said. "Hartwell said the board may act on the evidence without the ducal letter, now that he has submitted his formal request." "Hartwell is correct," Marcus said, "and I am not withdrawing it. Your political position is my concern," Marcus said, "not yours. What is yours is the second thing, which I suspect is coming." It came the following afternoon. Declan arrived at Briarfield, not warm this time, or rather warm in a different register, the warmth of a man who has decided that the affectionate approach has run its course, and something more direct is required. "You have made," he said, "a serious miscalculation. The county saw you announce a fictional engagement at Lady Kenworth's table. I have the names of 11 people who heard you. I will petition the court to extend your guardianship on grounds of instability. The announcement is evidence of disordered judgment, and I have witnesses to every syllable of it." Cordelia looked at him across her father's sitting room. "He is going to use my own lie against me," she told Marcus that evening. She had not lit the lamp in the study. She had come in through the side door. Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, had not questioned it. And she had sat down on the floor with her back against the bookcase and her knees drawn up and the room dark around her. Marcus found her there. He looked at her for a moment, then sat down on the floor beside her, his back against the same bookcase, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his arm. "He is going to use my own lie against me," she said. "The fictional engagement, the thing I did deliberately, the thing I did to expose him. He is reframing it as evidence that I am unfit to manage my own affairs." "We will not let him," Marcus said. "How?" "He has 11 witnesses." "He has 11 people who heard you make an announcement," Marcus said. "We have a forged letter, a contractor's written refusal, 7 years of account discrepancies, and a solicitor who has already submitted a formal inquiry request. His 11 witnesses heard one sentence. Hartwell's filing contains 40 pages of documentation." She leaned sideways. It was not a decision. It happened the way the wine glass had tilted, involuntarily, her head coming to rest against his shoulder because she had been holding herself upright for 7 years, and something had simply given way. He did not move. He did not put his arm around her. That would have been a choice. And this moment was not about choices. It was about weight and where to put it, and the specific exhaustion of a woman who had been fighting alone for longer than she should have been. 4 minutes. She counted them without meaning to. Then she straightened. "I am not fragile," she said. "I know," Marcus said. "You are exhausted. There is a difference." The following morning, Marcus laid both letters on the desk, the forged one and the real one, and held a magnifying glass over the capital G in each. Cordelia stood beside him and traced both letters with her finger, not touching the paper, but following the line of each stroke in the air above it. "His G always curled left," she said, "from the time I was a child. He wrote me letters when I was at school, every week without fail. The G in Graves, in Garden, in Gone, always left." She traced the forged letters G. "This one curls right. Whoever wrote this studied his hand carefully. The spacing is nearly perfect. The forward lean is right." But they did not know about the G. She sat with the real letter in her hand. Her father's last letter, written 8 months before he died. In the particular careful script of a man whose hand had slowed, but whose habits had not. "Trust your uncle, my dear. He has always been a good man. I am glad you will have him when I am gone." She did not speak for a long time. Marcus watched her hold it. He understood, looking at her face, that she was not grieving the forgery. She was grieving the real letter. The man who had written it had loved her completely, and had been wrong about the person he entrusted her to. And she had spent 7 years honoring that trust, because contradicting Declan had felt like contradicting her father. And now she was sitting with the proof that her father's love had been genuine, and his judgment had been catastrophically mistaken, and those two things could not be reconciled into anything comfortable. Marcus reached across and took the forged letter from her other hand. Carefully, with the particular deliberateness of removing something that had been causing harm, and placed it on the far side of the desk. He left her holding only the real one. His hand stayed on hers for 3 seconds. She gripped his fingers once, hard, with the grip of someone holding a rope in uncertain water, then released and picked up her quill. "We send the handwriting comparison to Hartwell today," she said, along with Mrs. Fellows's signed statement and a request that Mr. Cartwright, my father's solicitor, examine the forged letter. "I will send a writer to Cartwright this afternoon," Marcus said. She moved her chair to his side of the desk, not 2 inches this time, all the way beside him, close enough that their arms nearly touched. She opened the evidence file and began writing. Lady Kenworth's assembly room. 6 weeks after the dinner. 30 guests. The room was well lit, Lady Kenworth had seen to that, and the arrangement of chairs created a natural space at the front where a person might stand and address the company. Cordelia had not requested a podium. She stood beside the table where Mrs. Fellows had placed the contractor letter without being asked. And she did not look at her notes because she had no notes. She had spent 6 weeks building this moment. She was not going to read it from paper. 7 years ago, she said. My father died, and my uncle assumed my guardianship. In that time, he dismissed my maid when she came to me with questions about the household accounts. He reduced my pin money by half after I refused Lord Pemberton's suit, a suit I had refused twice in private without witnesses, which was precisely the problem. He told the county I was difficult, and last month he produced a letter in my father's hand, expressing a wish for a managed marriage. The room was very quiet. That letter, Cordelia continued, was examined by Mr. Cartwright, who served as my father's solicitor for 22 years. Mr. Cartwright has confirmed in writing that the letter was not written by my father. The G in my father's name, the capital G in Graves, always curled to the left. My father's G curled left in every letter he wrote me from the time I was 9 years old. In the letter my uncle produced, the G curls right. She held up both letters, the forged one and the real one. The room could see them clearly. She had made sure of that. From the side of the room, Declan stood. "This is a family matter, Lord Pemberton," Cordelia said, turning to where Pemberton sat in the 3rd row. "Were you told that I was willing?" The room turned. Pemberton was a large man with a square, weathered face, and his expression in that moment was the expression of a man who has discovered, very recently, that he has been cast in a play he did not audition for. Pemberton rose to his feet. "Sir Declan assured me," Pemberton said, his voice carrying the particular flatness of controlled anger, "that his niece desired the arrangement. He told me the trust was in sound order. He told me the late Viscount had expressed this wish himself." He paused. I accepted his assurances because I had no reason to doubt them. "And did I ever tell you any of this myself?" Cordelia asked. "No," Pemberton said. "I never spoke with you directly about the match. Sir Declan told me an introduction was unnecessary, that the matter was settled. Because my uncle ensured you would not need to speak with me," Cordelia said. "He was not arranging a marriage. He was arranging a transfer of my person, of my estate, and of the trust accounts that no one was meant to examine. Lord Pemberton was not chosen because he would be a good husband. He was chosen because he would not ask questions about the accounts." Near the servants' entrance, Mrs. Fellows spoke. She did not raise her voice. She had the carrying power of a woman who had managed a large household for 30 years and had never needed to shout to be heard. "The South Barn Roof Fund," Mrs. Fellows said. £400. Reported as spent in the trust accounts 2 years ago. The roof was never repaired. I have the contractor's written refusal, addressed to Sir Declan Graves, stating that the repair could not be undertaken because the initial payment had not been received. She placed the letter on the table beside the other documents. I kept it because I did not know what to do with it at the time. I know now. Pemberton's face changed. It was not anger at Cordelia. It was the expression of a man discovering the precise shape of how he had been used. He turned to Declan. "Sir Declan," Pemberton said, "I withdraw, formally, before this company. I am 51 years old, and I have made a considerable number of errors in my life. I will not add instrument of coercion to the accounting." The room went very still, the particular quiet of a gathering in which something has been settled beyond further argument. Declan stood. The avuncular warmth was gone entirely. What remained was a man whose authority had been stripped by the people he had relied on to confirm it. He looked at Cordelia with an expression she could not read and did not try to. "Your father trusted me," he said. "My father was wrong," Cordelia said. "He was wrong about you the same way I was wrong about you, because you are a very easy man to believe when no one is checking. There is someone checking now. Mr. Hartwell has submitted a formal inquiry to the trust board. Mr. Cartwright has provided a signed statement regarding the forgery. The contractor records are on that table. My father's real letters are in the hands of the board." Declan left. Not dramatically. He simply gathered himself and walked toward the door, and the room parted to let him through, and then he was gone. Cordelia looked at the table. The documents were arranged in the order she and Marcus had argued over for 3 weeks. Contractor letter first, disbursement record second, the real letter and the forged one side by side at the end, the G's visible to anyone who came close enough to look. 6 weeks ago, she said to the room, at Lady Kenworth's dinner, I announced that Lord Pemberton had proposed. That was a lie. I lied because I needed this room, these people, to witness what my uncle had constructed, and because I knew he could not complete it once it was visible. I am not proud of the method. She paused. I am proud of the result. Lady Kenworth began to clap. She was the only one for 4 full seconds. A slow, deliberate acknowledgement from a woman who had organized the seating arrangement with precisely this outcome in mind, and was not going to be modest about it. Then Mrs. Fellows. Then Pemberton, measured, sincere. The applause of a man who has just done something that cost him something and knows it. Then the rest of the room, and the room was warm with it. Marcus had not spoken during the assembly. He had stood near the window. The position of a man who had provided the legal mechanism and the ducal seal and the solicitor and the political cost, and who had understood that none of those things were what this room required from him tonight. What this room required was Cordelia, naming what had been done, calling witnesses from memory, claiming the space as her own. He had stood near the window and watched her do it. After the room had mostly cleared, Cordelia turned and found him approaching. She had her father's real letter in one hand and the contractor document in the other. And she looked at him for a moment. The naval posture, the controlled face, the 4 inches he had maintained between them for 6 years, as though it were a principle. She reached up and took his coat lapel in one hand. Not gently. The grip of a woman who grabbed things, reins, account ledgers, her uncle's fraud by the throat. She pulled. He came forward, The forward motion of a man who had held himself at 4 inches distance for 6 years and was done calculating the gap. She kissed him. When they parted, she was still holding the lapel. "Your voice cracked," she said. "6 weeks ago." "On who?" "I heard it every night for 6 weeks." "I did not mean to say it," Marcus said. "I know," she said. "That is exactly why it mattered." That evening, on the Kenworth terrace, the same stone railing, the same cold air, the same candlelight thrown from the tall windows. Cordelia sat on the balustrade, and Marcus stood beside her. Close enough that the distance between them was no longer a navigational calculation, but simply the space 2 people occupy when they have stopped pretending. "You did not speak in the assembly," she said. "You did not need me to speak," Marcus said. "I came to your house 6 weeks ago for a letter on ducal stationery," Cordelia said. "I want you to know that is not why I am sitting here now." "I know." "Do you?" she asked. He turned to look at her. The naval posture was still there. It was not a costume. It was simply how he stood. But his hands were not steady. "At the dinner," he said, "when you said he asked me to marry him, I discovered, in front of 14 people, that I could not bear it. I have spent 3 years performing a duke who makes considered decisions about alliances and obligations and the correct use of a title he never wanted. And in 1 second, sitting beside you at Lady Kenworth's table, the performance failed completely." "You were in the room for 6 years," Cordelia said. "Before Edward died. Before the title. You were in the room, and you said nothing. I was a second son with no estate and no particular prospects," Marcus said. "And then I was a duke who must marry for strategic reasons. The excuse changed shape. The result was the same." He looked out at the dark garden. "I told myself I was being sensible. I was being a coward with good vocabulary." She pulled off one glove. Her hand, bare, cold, the hand of a woman who had been working in gardens and sorting documents and gripping stone railings. She held it out. "I am done performing," she said. "If you want the woman who lies at dinner tables and shouts at her uncle in assembly rooms and has argued with every contractor in the county and cannot manage a household without making enemies of half the tradespeople, that woman, not a calmer version, she does not exist." He took her hand, not gently, with the same directness she had offered it, the grip of a man who had spent 8 years on ships in weather that did not accommodate uncertainty. "I spent 8 years on frigates," Marcus said. "I did not enjoy the calm days. I enjoyed the ones that required all hands on deck and left no time for performing anything." "That is sentimental," she said. "It is specific," Marcus said. "There is a difference." She gripped his hand hard. The grip of a woman choosing, for the first time in 7 years, to hold a person instead of holding herself together alone. "Thursday," she said. "Briarfield, the South Gardens. I am replanting my father's lavender. The beds have been dead for years, and I am starting over from bare earth. I could use someone who follows instructions." "I follow instructions poorly," Marcus said. "I know," she said. "You will improve." Late summer. Briarfield. Cordelia's 25th birthday. The trust had transferred to her control 3 weeks prior, a formal, documented, legally unambiguous transfer, overseen by Hartwell and the board and Mr. Cartwright. The recovered funds accounted for, and the inquiry's findings submitted to the appropriate authorities. Declan had not appeared at Briarfield since the assembly. He had written once, a letter she read and set aside. The south border was blooming. Lavender in long rows, rosemary at the corners, sage along the inner edge. the beds replanted from bare earth over 6 weeks of mournings, Cordelia on her knees in the soil with the tenant's children handing her seedlings, and Mrs. Fellows arriving at noon with bread and strong tea. The south gate had been oiled at last. It no longer creaked. The village had come for the garden party, not a formal affair, nothing with card tables or a hired orchestra, just the people who had lived on and around Briarfield for 30 years and had watched the estate decline under Declan's management and were now watching it come back. Mr. Gregson's barn had a new roof, paid from the recovered funds. The Alderton family's cottage had new windows. The accounts were Cordelia's, and she had read every line. Mrs. Fellows had organized the food. Children ran between the lavender rows. The air smelled of herbs and cut grass and the particular warmth of late summer in a garden that had been properly tended. Marcus arrived on foot through the front gate, carrying a flat wooden case under one arm. "You are late," Cordelia said. "I stopped in Cheltenham," Marcus said. She looked at the case. It was old, the wood worn smooth at the corners, the brass fittings darkened with age. She recognized it before he opened it. "That is my father's sextant," she said. "It is," Marcus said. "Declan sold it 2 years ago to an instrument dealer on the promenade. I found it in the estate sale records when Hartwell was going through the asset transfers. I went and bought it back this morning." She opened the case. The brass sextant her father had used to teach her celestial navigation when she was 10. Standing in the south garden in the early evening while he showed her how to measure the angle between the horizon and a star. She lifted it, sighted along the arm toward the horizon above the lavender. "The calibration is off," she said. "I thought you might want to fix it yourself," Marcus said. She set the sextant on the garden table beside the lavender. Around them, the party continued. Mrs. Fellows directing 2 of the village women with a cake. Mr. Gregson talking to a group of tenants near the gate. Children weaving between the adults with the single-minded energy of children who have been given permission to run. "You bought back my father's sextant," Cordelia said. "Your father taught you to navigate," Marcus said. "You taught yourself to fight. I thought you should have both instruments." She looked at him across the garden table, the man who had moved her desk 6 inches without comment, who had covered her with his coat and said nothing, who had sat beside her on the floor of a dark study and told her the difference between fragile and exhausted, who had stood near the window in the assembly room and let her claim the room as her own. She took his hand across the table. The lavender moved in the warm air. The children ran past. Mims Fellows called something from the far side of the garden. "You are staring," Cordelia said. "I am present," Marcus said. "I learned the distinction from a woman who argued with me about rigging when she was 18. "The rigging was wrong," she said. "The rigging was wrong," he agreed. "You were right. You have been right about most things. I am still catching up." She did not let go. He did not let go. The sextant waited on the table to be calibrated. The lavender grew in the soil she had turned herself. And the south gate stood open to the summer afternoon, oiled at last, swinging easy and silent on its hinges.